Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for EarthEcho STEMExplore Virtual Career Connection, featuring Katelyn Lichte, production engineer at Corteva AgriScience in Walnut Creek, California. My name is Casey. I'm a programs manager here at EarthEcho International, and we are joined today by one of our exceptional Youth Leadership Council members, Lily. And Lily is going to moderate today's live event. Here at EarthEcho, we're proud to work with an outstanding group of young leaders who help us drive our work to empower their peers around the globe and to take an active role in protecting our planet. And Lily's a great example of that. Now, Lily is a junior at the Downingtown STEM Academy of Pennsylvania, where she participates in the International Baccalaureate program. She is interested in studying chemistry and environmental science and loves being outdoors. She enjoys being part of her school's tennis and track teams, as well as paddleboarding and cooking. Lily became interested in the environment at a very early age while participating in a 4-H Junior Master Gardener program, where she learned how to sustainably grow and harvest fruits and vegetables. Lily loves to help young girls explore career options in the STEM field, so STEMexplore is a perfect fit. She is excited to share her ideas and work with others to make a positive impact on the environment. Take it away, Lily.
Thanks, Casey. We are so excited to have students from all over the globe joining us as we learn about exciting and sustainable careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. This live event is part of STEMexplore, which is EarthEcho's program that brings inspiration to life by telling the stories of dynamic female professionals in STEM careers during live virtual career connections. We want to thank our founding sponsor, United Technologies, for their support of women in STEM. Here at EarthEcho, we believe that youth have the power to change the planet. Visit www.earthecho.org to learn more about our programs. You can also access resources like STEMexplore's career portfolio videos, as well as tune in for future upcoming live events just like this one. I'd like to recognize and thank STEMexplore's partner sites across the country and recognize those joining us today. Let's get a hello from our friends with Primetime Palm Beach County in West Palm Beach, Florida. Okay, let's start with Coleman Park. Hello, Coleman Park. Hello. Okay.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Now let's head across the town in West Palm to Berkshire Elementary. Hi, everyone. Okay. Now we can go to North Carolina, to Charlotte in North Carolina, and say hello to our partners at MECED. How's it going, MECED? Okay. Lastly, let's say hello to our friends at Cedar Rapids, Iowa, at Jefferson High School STEM Club. Hi, Jefferson High. Okay. It's great to have everybody joining us today. We also want to give a warm welcome to everyone tuning into our live streams. Just a reminder that you can send in questions for our STEM expert via chat, and we will break throughout today's presentation to see if you have any questions. Feel free to start typing questions now or later in the space on YouTube or in the Zoom feed, and we'll be sure to answer those as we go along through the presentation. Now let's get started. I want to welcome our special guest for EarthEcho's STEMexplore Virtual Career Connection, Katelyn Lichte. Good afternoon, Katelyn.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Katelyn Lichte is a production engineer for Corteva AgriScience in Pittsburgh, California. She was a first-generation college student and graduated from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities in 2017 with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. Throughout college and her professional career, Katelyn has lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, Iowa City, Iowa, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and most recently, Walnut Creek, California. She is very active in her community, especially with STEM outreach. Her significant contributors to her industry were recognized in June 2019 when Katelyn was named one of the top 20 under 30 in the seed industry by Seed World magazine. Katelyn is also the Outreach Chair-elect for Society of Women's Engineers. Katelyn, why don't you tell us more about what you do?
Awesome. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I work for Corteva Agriscience, and Corteva really has three parts to their business. They have one part that is their seed portion of their business. So think corn, soybean seeds, wheat seeds, basically anything that a farmer would be planting in their field to feed us, clothe us, put fuel in our vehicles. All of that is what we provide to those farmers. I worked on that side of the business a couple of years ago, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation. The other part of our business that I want to talk about is called crop protection. And crop protection is chemicals that farmers then go and apply to their field, like in the picture here where it's being sprayed over this field. Those are herbicides, pesticides, and nitrogen management products, basically anything that a farmer wants to spray on their field that'll get rid of bugs or weeds. You know, like when you go out to your garden and need to pull the weeds. Well, farmers don't do that by hand anymore. They go out and they spray this chemical across, and it kills those weeds for them so that they don't have to bother with it. And then the last part of our business is software, and it's called Granular. So Granular is basically our version of offering farmers apps that they can put on their phones, their iPads, whatever they have available to them to actually go and help them manage their fields, whether it's looking at crop health, so are their corn and soybeans still alive, do they need help, or even managing budgets and finances, because we all know that doing that by ourselves is not any fun. So if you go to the next page, so as I mentioned, I'm currently working on our crop protection side of our business. So basically what that is chemical manufacturing for these farmers. So specifically, if you look at the top left picture there with all the pipes and the sky in the background and everything, that's a picture of what my plant looks like. And what it is there's a bunch of chemicals, water, steam, different pieces of equipment, all kind of piled into this really puzzle-like looking area. And what it does is it creates a product that then we can go and sell to our farmers. So a large portion of our products that we create are chlorination products. So that means that we're taking carbon and we're adding chlorine to that. So basically, almost all of life is made up of some sort of carbon mixed with some other different chemistry elements. So what we're doing is we're taking that base molecule, adding something else to it, and it creates this chemical that when sprayed onto insects or on different weeds, it'll kill them without harming the crops that we want to keep alive. So I can go out to your garden and spray this on your corn, and it won't kill your corn, it'll just kill the pesky weeds that are growing. So my job specifically is that every time we create these chemistries, we also have waste associated with it. So it's just like cracking an egg. You want the yolk inside the egg, but you have this shell now that you have to get rid of. So for you, it's just easy enough. You throw it in the garbage. For us, it's not that easy. That waste is considered hazardous, meaning that it can be harmful to the environment, people, and animals. So my specific process that I help oversee gets rid of that waste, and it does so via burning it. So just like an engine, or when you have like a campfire, you're starting the wood on fire, we're doing something very similar to the waste. We're starting it on fire, we're burning it at very, very high temperatures that you would never see naturally, but we have them in these confined vessels that have a lot of safety features on them. So we're burning that waste to get rid of it. But again, since this is a hazardous process, those emissions or the products that come out after you're burning it, so like campfire, you have the soot or the ash at the bottom, we have some of that too that it comes out when we burn our product. So we have to make sure that we're getting rid of it safely. And as I mentioned, it's hazardous. So that means that we're working with government agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency to ensure that we're not exceeding any of those emission standards that are in place. So basically, we're making sure that we're caring for the environment by ensuring that we're not putting anything out into the environment that's harmful to it. So my job depends on, my day-to-day job at least, depends on how my plant's running. If my plant is running really, really well when I come in the morning, meaning that we're burning things the way we're supposed to, my operators who are actually running the equipment are feeling good about themselves, they know what they're doing, they don't have any questions, I can actually go back to my office and relax a little bit. And instead of going out and firefighting, sometimes literal fires in my plant, I can do projects or basically implement things into our plant that'll make either the environment happier, meaning that we're reducing our emissions or the things that we're releasing into the environment, or I can make my operators' lives easier by improving the way that they do their work, whether it's by making something safer, making it easier where they can sit in their chair and click a button versus going out and moving things around on the process. All of that falls onto me. But there's a second part of my job too, and that's if my plant's not running, meaning that we're not burning things, we're not moving products forward. That's when the really stressful and also fun part of my job happens, because that means I come in and I have to make sure that I get that plant back up and running as quickly as possible. So my day is then spent out in my process, working with operators, talking through the problems that they're having, and trying to figure out how we fix this thing. Sometimes that's literally just clicking a couple buttons in a different order, and sometimes that means tearing apart pieces of equipment and having to completely redo things. It really all depends. And on top of all of that, I have to make sure that we're always keeping environmental regulatory agencies like the EPA updated on everything that happens. Because if something goes wrong in my plant and we release more emissions or something harmful into the environment, I'm the one who has to have that conversation with them and say, hey, we messed up here. This is what we're going to do to fix it. Is that okay? Or do you want us to take a more aggressive, less aggressive approach to that? So it's a lot of fun, and my job definitely changes day to day depending on what's going on in the particular day. Even the weather can sometimes affect our process.
Okay, so now we can talk about, do you want to talk about some realities? For instance, how much money would someone expect to make in this field or the field that you're in?
Yeah, absolutely. So my job is kind of a combination of chemical engineering and manufacturing engineering. So they call it production engineering. And one of the cool things that you have to keep an eye on when you're looking at what it pays and everything is what part of the country you're in. So for example, California is really expensive to live here. So we're typically paid a little bit more for doing the same job as someone in Iowa because we have to pay more for our housing. So if I made the same amount here as I did when I lived in Iowa, I'd actually be making less money or have less money for fun things because more of my money is going towards rent. So it's important to keep that in mind too when you're looking at these statistics. But overall, the average across the country for my job is about $96,000, which is very high. And it's one of the awesome things about engineering is you go to school for a little while and it's hard and can be kind of frustrating sometimes, but you get out and you have the salary that they give you because they recognize that it's a difficult job. And it's important to know that you have money then to spend on fun things that are stress relieving and also being able to spend time on vacations and family and making sure you're taking those breaks and you have enough money to do so.
Okay, so can you tell us a little more about your pathway to this career? And we can start with your educational path, your different schools to get.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the cool things that I always like to share with audiences when I talk about my path is that a lot of people who go into engineering oftentimes have relatives who are engineers or knew someone who was an engineer or basically had always been told that they were going to be an engineer. And that's not my story at all. I went to a really, really small elementary school and high school in a rural part of Minnesota called Kimball. Our town population was 600 people, and my graduating class from school was 35. So we were a very, very small public high school, which is even more astounding. And we didn't have a lot of funding for science, technology, or really anything for that matter. Most of our school was focused on just getting kids to graduate and having them go to maybe a community college, getting a 2-year tech degree, and then coming back and working in that same community. Luckily for me, I had a couple teachers who recognized that I was very good at the STEM topics, so science, engineering, math. We had one intro to engineering class that I really excelled at, and my teachers took the time to tell me, hey, you can't just go and do a 2-year tech degree. Like you you need to go somewhere else and do a 4-year actual engineering degree. We think that this would be really good for your future. And as someone who both my parents work manual labor jobs, no one in my family has ever gone to college before, it meant a lot to me to hear my teachers tell me that, because while I knew I was good at those things, I never thought it was really an option because no one in my family had ever done it. And no one in my family knew how to even go about applying to college. So it was really cool to have those teachers' support. And while I was in high school, I participated in a couple different academic clubs, one being Knowledge Bowl. It can be called Quiz Bowl, too, depending on what state you're in. I was also a part of speech, and speech was a huge activity that I was a part of that really shaped who I am today. It got me over my fear of public speaking and really allowed me to talk to different audiences, read different audiences, and just really be more confident when I'm talking to different people. So speech is really cool, and if you have a speech club at your school, I would definitely encourage you to do it. I was terrified at my first meet, but after a couple, I was told I was really good at it and really enjoyed it the rest of the time. And then I was also in, I also played softball and volleyball and still do to this day. It's good to have that balance too. You can have the academics, but having something else to go do as well is really important. So as I mentioned, I had several teachers actually, but one in particular who, when I was a junior in high school, told me that there was this camp at the University of Minnesota. It was called Exploring Careers in Engineering and Physical Science. And he told me that it's this summer and that he wanted to recommend me to go and that the school would actually pay for me to go. So it would be no cost to my family, who really couldn't afford to send me off to a university for a week with hotels and all of that. So he ended up submitting a letter recommendation for me. I ended up getting accepted to the camp and going to the camp. And that was what really solidified my desire to not only study engineering, but to do it at the University of Minnesota. I got to meet the professors in a bunch of different disciplines and talk to them about what they did, what people in those majors typically go to do in their professions. And it really made me want to stick with engineering. So that fall, I ended up applying to the University of Minnesota, getting accepted, and then going to the University of Minnesota for college. So while I was there, I studied mechanical engineering. And when I first started, funny enough, I was first a chemical engineer, but my freshman year, I didn't like anything that I was doing in class. I thought it was really boring and silly. And I had a lab partner in my biology class who was a mechanical engineer, and everything that he said he was doing in his classes sounded way cooler than what I was doing. So I ended up switching majors. And I partially made that decision too because my freshman year of college, I lived in what was called the Wise House. The Wise House is the Women in Science and Engineering. It's a dorm that has one floor that is only women who are studying STEM at the University of Minnesota. So I got to really make friends there, see what everyone else was studying as well. And they were the ones who really convinced me, like, yeah, you're okay to change your major. Everyone does it, or at least everyone considers it at some point. So they were a huge part of me making the switch to mechanical engineering. The other thing to note when I was at Minnesota was that I was really involved with a student group called the Society of Women Engineers. And again, it was an all-female group that was only people who were studying engineering or something closely related, like computer science, chemistry, physics, something very closely related. And it was really just this network of women that I could go to and say, hey, I'm struggling here. Are you having that same issue? Do you know this professor? Can you help me? I'm just struggling to study hard enough and all of that. So I wanted to make sure that I had that support system, and they really offered me it. And they also offered me the opportunity for professional development and also for doing technical projects. Before going to college, I honestly didn't do a whole lot of technical things in high school because we didn't have the opportunity to. So they allowed me to get that as well. So a couple slides back, right there, perfect. So I also did a couple of internships while I was in college. So basically I took the summer to work at a couple of different areas and learn more about what engineers do in those fields. So one of my internships was with the Medical Devices Center on campus. So I worked in one of our labs on campus that focused on partnering with the Mayo Clinic, and they would allow us to work with different doctors and actually design medical devices based on their patients' needs. that was a really cool opportunity to get that immediate feedback of how engineering can directly affect people's lives. And then I also interned at a place called Bueller. They are an agricultural manufacturing company. And what they did is they actually produced equipment to process food ingredients. So I got to work with them and help design those different things. And the last thing to note, while I was in college, I did what was called a co-op. A co-op is an extended internship. So an internship is usually 3 months during the summer when you're not studying. Co-op is generally when you take a month, or not a month, a semester or two off of college and actually go live somewhere else and work for this company for, I did 8 months down in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the really cool thing about the co-op is, if you keep it on this slide, I actually had the opportunity to sort of test drive what it was like to live really far away from home. So if you look up in the middle, Minnesota is that northern part. Kimball and where I went to college are both in Minnesota. And down on the sort of right-hand side there is where I ended up working for Cargill. It's 1,200 miles away from Minneapolis, so roughly 17 hours away from my friends and family. So it gave me this really cool opportunity to not only test drive engineering, but to test drive living away from home. I'd only ever lived in Minnesota before, and it gave me that opportunity to say, this is temporary. If I hate it, I'm moving back in 8 months. And actually, I ended up loving it. I was okay with living in a different part of the country, and it really shaped who I was. Perfect.
Oh, that's awesome. It's so amazing that you were able to find that many mentors, and especially teachers and people in your community that really like help you go through. I know the college process it's even tough with people around me who had gone to college who have already done it. It's like, that's really amazing. So is there any like specific situations, or I know you had talked about this a little bit, if you want to extend on that, any really specific situations that made you want to switch your major or made you want to like really go into this path exactly where you are now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when I was in college, like I had mentioned, my freshman year, they had you take a seminar. So basically a class where you just listen to people talk about what they did in the major that you were being told basically that you were going into. So for me, it was chemical engineering is what I had told them I wanted to do. So I was in this class listening to all these chemical engineers talk about, oh, I do this at my job, I do this, I do that. And as a freshman, I thought it was really boring. And I didn't really, I didn't really click with anything they were saying. I didn't really see the direct impact. And I wanted to make sure that no matter what major I chose, that I was directly impacting society, the environment, having some sort of direct impact where I could tell and measure it. And everyone that talked in that seminar, I didn't get that from them. I couldn't see how they were directly affecting anything. And now I kind of do. My job is more chemical engineering now than I'd like to admit sometimes. But at that point in my life, I didn't really see that direct impact. It was more abstract and sort of hand wavy, like, oh, we do things. Where mechanical engineering, I could literally see things happening. Like if you brought me a medical device, so like a pacemaker, I could say that, yes, engineering was involved here, here, and this directly impacts someone's life. It can save their life. So the friend that I had in my biology lab was actually working on medical devices and actually took me to the medical devices center. That's how I got that internship too. But he showed me the projects he was working on and the patients that he was interviewing and helping to create better lives for. And that really resonated with me and was sort of the click that made me really want to change.
And something to note too, Katelyn, I'm going to pop in here. It's interesting that you mentioned the medical devices because we actually, for STEMExplore, during this season, we have had a nurse who, for all intents and purposes, her training was in nurse and in healthcare and in occupational therapy. And she found the need for nurses to be engineers for each individual patient. And so they had recently just opened a makerspace. And so she trains all of her nurses how to use software and how to actually 3D print devices. And that's here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where I happen to be, where I know you have lived, and also where Jefferson High School, who is joining us today, they are as well. So that's such a nice little tie-in. Now, what sorts of things do you like to do outside of work, maybe?
Yeah, so the inspiration slide actually ties really closely into this. The inspiration and the outside of work slide, they're both kind of involved. So outside of work, I'm still very involved with the Society of Women Engineers. It's a professional organization as well. And through them, I do a lot of STEM outreach. So as Lily mentioned in the intro, I'm the chair-elect for the society for their outreach efforts. So basically, I'm shaping this giant organization's efforts towards outreach and how we go about outreach. And recently, the picture in the middle there with all the orange shirts, it was an activity I actually did in Cedar Rapids when I was there as their outreach chair for the East Central Iowa section of SWE. And we had 50 girls in K through 2 who came and learned about robotics from us. Absolutely free for them to be there. SWE paid for everything. And it also allowed them, if they were Girl Scouts, to earn their engineering journey badge as well. So we offered them how to do engineering. We worked with what's called Autobots, which are little robots that you can program and tell them what to do using color. So it was a really cool combination of using their natural want to draw and to color things and everything with teaching them about engineering. So that's a huge part of what I do. I joke a lot with my boyfriend that it's actually a second job for me because just about everything I do outside of work is somehow related to doing outreach, going to whether it's a local government or state government or federal government even. I've been to Washington, D.C. a couple of times to actually advocate for STEM education and funding for those schools, especially coming from a small rural school. I know how important it is to still have exposure to STEM, even if you're at a small rural school. And Iowa was a huge piece of that for me too, because I had the opportunity to go to all these rural schools and really have an impact because no one else really went there and talked to them. It was all these more urban schools that were getting that attention. So I make that a big part of what I do. And California, it's a little bit more urban than Iowa was, but I'm still trying to go to schools and talk to them about what STEM outreach is. And then the picture on the left, that's my boyfriend and I. We just adopted a new golden retriever puppy as of a week and 2 days ago. So that's our 12-week-old golden retriever puppy named Puck. And then the middle picture, that's our dog Amara. We got her when we still lived in Iowa. She's a 1.5-year-old German Shepherd. So we spend a lot of time with them now. I had to go home earlier to let Puck out to do his business in the backyard before going back to work. So they're a huge part of my life. And then the last picture on this slide, the league champions slide. So I play a lot of volleyball still in my free time. I absolutely love it. It's a great stress reliever. So that was in Cedar Rapids as well. My team won our league for that year for sand volleyball. So it's really important to have hobbies outside of work or outside of school so that you still feel like you're engaged, you're not stressed out all the time, and you have something else to think about besides just work and school. Because work and school can be very stressful if that's all you think about.
Yes, I agree. Also, your puppies are so cute. Oh my gosh.
I will tell them you said that.
Okay. Now let's check into some of our interactive sites and see if they have any questions for Katelyn today. So first, let's start with our friends in Charlotte, North Carolina at MECED. MECED, do you have any questions for Katelyn today?
Any question?
No, we good.
No question right now. I thought it was really interesting about the portion about the income. I just personally, just looking at that, it kind of threw me because I wasn't expecting it to be so much for a base pay, and then the minimum was almost $70,000 a year. I thought that was different, and I didn't know much about that.
Excellent. And MECED, we'll come back to you if you think of any questions as well. Go ahead, Lily.
Okay, so now let's check in at Coleman Park in West Palm, Florida. Coleman Park, do you have any questions?
Yes. How do y'all keep the device on that thing?
Can you say that again?
How the device how do you keep the device on that thing that you put it on? Like if it's furry, how you gonna put it on?
I don't think Katelyn talked about any devices that she put on animals.
Another question?
That's cool.
EJ.
Wait, someone does God.
She doesn't work with that.
I think most of the farming equipment that she uses are not furry, so that's a good thing.
What was the big- Go ahead.
Coleman Park, do you have another question?
Hold on.
Wait, I got a question.
Perfect.
Do you get tired from doing your job sometimes?
That's a
Do I
great
get tired?
question. Do you get tired?
Absolutely, yeah. So I work in manufacturing, so a lot of times when things break, I have to stay late to get them back and going. So it can be really long hours sometimes, but it's also really, really fun to see that you fixed something after it was broken. But yeah, you definitely get tired, and that's what those hobbies are for too, to get your mind off of work and actually let you relax too. Because if you think about work all the time, you're not going to sleep very well either.
Any other questions?
Did you make all of that?
Any other questions, Coleman Park?
Yes.
No? Okay, well, Fantasia, what's your question? You gotta hurry up because they're on the time limit. Fantasia.
Never
No?
mind.
No? Okay.
Never mind.
Welcome.
You can be.
Coleman Park, we'll come back to you. So keep those questions in mind. Sounds good. Go ahead, Lily.
Okay, now let's head to West Palm to Berkshire Elementary. Do you guys have any questions?
And Lily, I don't think Berkshire has joined
Oh,
us, so
they're
you
not
can move
on?
on to Jefferson High. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Jefferson High in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Does anybody have any questions?
What's the next activity you're planning for the STEM outreach
That's a great question. So what's my next activity I'm planning for STEM outreach? Yeah, so I'm actually planning in Oakland, which is just west of where I live right now, in a couple of months. I am doing a full robotics workshop for them. So I'm going to have kindergartners there that are going to learn about the Autobots, just like I did with Cedar Rapids. And then I'm also bringing some high schoolers in who are, 9th, 10th grade or middle school, that are going to be learning about Arduinos, so microcontrollers, and learning to program those, as well as to build some very simple robots that I have. I have a lot of materials left over from college that I've kind of been bringing with me from place to place. So I'm going to have those available. And we're also going to be going to a makerspace that has a 3D printer. So we'll be able to sort of 3D print on the fly if I don't have the right materials for them.
Jefferson High, do you have another question?
No, we're good.
You guys are good? All right, Lily, go ahead.
Okay, so, do we have any questions in the chat?
Actually, let's see here. We do have a question from the chat. And in fact, it's a viewer from Cedar Rapids. I think they noticed your dogs. So I can pull up that slide again. But the question is, did you say you adopted your other dog in Cedar Rapids? And if so, where did you get that dog?
Yeah, so Amara wasn't actually adopted. We got her from a breeder just south of Decorah, Iowa. So we got her right when we moved to Cedar Rapids. We bought a house, and I actually surprised my boyfriend 2 days later with a dog. So, but yeah, she's from a breeder from Windy Acres Shepherds in Decorah, Iowa.
Perfect. All right. There you go, Lily. Go ahead.
Okay, so now if you want to tell us a little bit more about how you got where you are, Minnesota to Iowa to California.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, Minnesota was home in college. I didn't put North Carolina on here because I was only there for 8 months and never actually changed my address to North Carolina. So I kind of skipped that. But after college, Iowa was my first full-time job. So as I had mentioned, going to Charlotte had kind of shown me that I was okay with moving away from home. So I made this deal with myself when I went back to college that I was not going to take my first full-time job in Minnesota. I was going to force myself to move somewhere else and to live in a couple different places before maybe eventually going back to Minnesota. So my first my first job after college was in Iowa. And Iowa's not horribly different than Minnesota, but it was enough to sort of stretch that comfort zone again. So I ended up moving to Iowa. I lived there for about 2 years. I lived in 3 different cities while I was there. So I moved around a little bit within Iowa to sort of try different towns, flavors, and everything. The last year I lived in Iowa City, Iowa, which is just south of Cedar Rapids. And then while I was there, I also worked for Corteva, but I worked at one of their seed facilities. So if you want to go to the next slide really quick, I'll sort of touch on that. So I worked in a seed facility in very, very rural Iowa. And a lot of people don't really realize that agriculture is more involved than just the farmer in the field. There's other people there that have to provide the seed, provide the crop protection that I work in now, or even what goes into getting a good seed. So a lot of people don't realize either that seeds are living organisms. You can kill them, or you can take care of them really, really well, and they'll grow into a corn stalk or soybeans or something to feed, clothe, or give us fuel. So while I was there, I never had really thought about any of those things and had the opportunity to explore agriculture very intimately. So I worked in a seed production facility. So basically we were taking crops from farmers that they had harvested specifically to provide seeds. But when they came into our plant, they weren't just perfect seeds that you could just plant into the ground and be okay with. Some of them would grow, some of them wouldn't. So we put them through a bunch of different pieces of equipment that would take out all the seeds that weren't going to grow. And a lot of that technology is really groundbreaking. So one of the coolest pieces of equipment that I worked with was called a vision sorter. So if you've heard about machine vision or algorithms to pick out different things, that's what this machine did. So it took a bunch of different pictures of corn or soybeans and looked, and we could tell it, you see this seed? This is what a good seed looks like. I want to get rid of everything that doesn't look just like this one. And they would take tons and tons of pictures and actually get rid of every single seed that didn't look right or even had a slight like dimple in it. It was absolutely amazing, this technology. So I got to be really intimate with the equipment. And then I was also part of what was called the Emerging Leaders Program while I was there, which is a leadership development program that Corteva has for their newly graduated employees. And it allowed me to explore different parts of our business as well. So I actually got to go into the field with the agronomists. The agronomists are the experts on plant health, so they know exactly what a good corn stalk looks like, a bad corn stalk, good soybeans, bad soybeans, all of that. And I got to meet a lot of farmers and talk to them and see the direct impact that us providing them with really good seeds, or even what climate would do to their fields. I got to get to know them really, really closely, and that's actually what inspired me to stay in agriculture. Before that, I actually really wanted to go into medical devices and decided to take a chance on agriculture, but after working at that seed facility, I don't think I ever want to get out of agriculture. I really love this industry and everything that it affects. So while I was there, I was also very involved in the community again. I would go out to different schools and teach them about agriculture. And that's a big part of why I was recognized as one of the top 20 under 30 was primarily from my outreach efforts to actually inform people about what agriculture is. And then that also led to my company thinking that I was a good candidate to move out to my California site now and work out here.
Okay, that's awesome. So here at here at EarthEcho, we believe that we can act now for a sustainable future. Can you tell us how your job contributes to a sustainable future?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something I'm really, really passionate about too. A lot of people think that the chemical industry is awful for the environment, that all we're doing is destroying everything, and even people think that farmers are destroying the environment, and that's not really true. So my company, specifically out in California with our chemical facility, we're now looking into technologies called green chemistry. And green chemistry means that we're looking for things that are already in the environment that we can maybe produce in mass to then spray in the fields instead of what we call synthetic chemistries or chemistries that humans have made themselves, and to apply that. So the difference is that green chemistries don't create what's called runoff, or what you've heard about killing the Gulf of Mexico algae and everything. It doesn't have that ability to run off into rivers and cause issues with water quality. So my company is doing a lot of research and development right now into that, and is actually starting to change the way that our processes run so that we can run these green chemistries and create them instead of these synthetic chemistries. One of the other cool things that we're doing is that middle picture is a drone. We're using drones now with our farmers to look at their fields to identify when they have disease or pests. And instead of blanket spraying, so instead of spraying the entire field, we use these drones to tell us exactly where that disease is in that field, and we spray only that part of the field. So we're saving a lot of resources as well as preventing, again, overuse of that chemical, which can negatively affect the environment. And then the top right-hand picture there is a picture of some wetlands out here in Pittsburgh, California that Corteva actually sustains and preserves. We have 500 acres of it here that we have taken upon ourselves to make sure that we're preserving it, and we bring the public onto the land, talk to them about wetlands and why they're important to the environment, and let them sort of explore the wetlands without destroying it. And then the last really cool thing that I wanted to touch on that Corteva is doing is we've recently partnered with the National Science Teaching Association to provide lesson plans and curriculum for teachers to use in their classrooms to teach students about agriculture. So I think there's 8 lesson plans right now on the NSTA website that will allow teachers to walk through with their student with full lesson plans, learning objectives, everything, different pieces of agriculture, including soil erosion, pesticide, chemical use, genetically modified organisms. The whole shebang is on there for them to use.
That's super incredible, Katelyn. Here at EarthEcho, we work really closely with NSTA as well. We're always at the national conference, and that's really amazing to see that, because I do think agriculture is definitely a sector. I feel like people are getting a little bit more aware of where their food comes from, but I feel like it is easily a disconnect for people of what is agriculture and what is agri-science, and to tie in engineering with that is so incredible. That's really cool.
So, Katelyn, thinking back to when you were a student, what advice do you have for students now?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is another really thing that I love talking about. So my top words of advice would be to take risks. So like I took a risk moving to Charlotte. I mean, moving to California was a huge risk for me too, because I went from being 3 hours away from my family to I'm about 26 hours away by driving. So basically you have to fly to come see me. Life is all about risks. And if you're not taking risks, you're likely not growing, or you're likely just living in your comfort zone. And if you really want to go out and change the world, you can't just live in your comfort zone. You really need to take those risks and be willing to fail as well, because failure is one of the best teachers. One of the other things is never stop learning. So as I mentioned, I went to school for mechanical engineering, but now I work in agriculture in a more of a chemical engineering role, which isn't directly applicable either way, but my company saw that I really love learning and I'm totally okay with not knowing something, but I'll figure it out. And that's a really important life skill too, to not just be okay with the status quo. And you want to be able to ask why and be able to continuously learn so that you're growing as a person. And then lastly, I mentioned this a couple times too with my inspiration slides, is find something you're passionate about. If you're passionate about your job or a hobby, life's always going to be fun. And even when things get stressful or you're sad about something, those passions are going to be what pushes you through and really motivates you to help the world or to really be good at your job or to help others.
Okay, so now why don't we check in on our interactive sites to see if we have any more questions. So first, let's go to Charlotte, North Carolina at MECED. If you guys have any questions.
What's your name again? What's your name again? Katelyn. On your average work day, what is it like? Are you like out and about around the facility?
Yeah, so it depends on the day for sure. If it's a calm day and I'm not trying to literally fight fires sometimes, I'm usually in my office about half the day, and the other half of the day I'm out in the process looking for issues, talking to my operators and figuring out how I can improve it for them, or just walking drawings in my process to make sure that they're up to date if we get audited by one of the environmental agencies.
Nika, do you have another question?
Yeah, someone said, what's your strongest skill set you would say that you have?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it kind of goes,
Sorry.
Oh,
she's
what would you need? Yeah. Okay. Also a great question. So there's kind of two things, and I mentioned one of them in my words of advice, and that's definitely the never stop learning. One of the biggest things that you can do to prepare yourself for engineering is be able to learn and to not be frustrated while learning and to always be asking why and why does that happen, or can it happen this way, or can something else happen? And then also problem solving, which kind of goes with learning, but it's having that mindset of things aren't always okay with the status quo. I want to make things better. How do I make it better? It's been done like this for 20 years. Why can't we do it a different way? All of that is really important to be an engineer, and really any STEM professional needs to be curious and be able to problem solve.
Do we have any more from Mecca?
No, we're good. Thank you so much.
Okay. So now let's go to Coleman Park and West Palm, Florida. Coleman Park, do you have any questions for Katelyn? Who are they on?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Coleman Park.
Coleman Park have no questions. Thank you for it again. Thank you, Ms. Katelyn. Yes.
Okay. Now why don't we go to West Palm to Berkshire Elementary? Is Berkshire here today? I don't remember.
Nope, they are not.
They're not. Okay. And now we will go to Jefferson High School in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. With any questions?
Go ahead, Jefferson High School. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have Ava here. For the green chemistry projects you were working on, is that like through like your job, and do you work with it often?
So I don't work directly with it. It's still in research and development, so it's pending approval from a bunch of government agencies for us to actually start manufacturing it. But in about a year and a half, we're expected to have some of these chemistries come to the Pittsburgh site, and I will then be actively involved with manufacturing and producing them.
Okay. Oh, I actually have one question. When you're working on a project or a like if you're working on a project or if you're out in the field, how long would you say a typical project lasts? Like, is it a short amount of time, like a couple of days, or is this like long term, like years?
Yeah, so that's also a great question. And it definitely depends on the scope of the project, so how much you want to do. So there's some projects that are just programming changes or changing how an operator interacts out in the field with a piece of equipment. Those can last maybe a week or two, but most projects are at least a year long, if not several years long, because you have to be able to properly plan out what you want to do, go through procurement, so buying everything and designing everything and how it's going to fit into the plant. And since we work in chemicals and are regulated by a bunch of government agencies, we oftentimes have to get permit changes from those government agencies, and those take a minimum of 6 months to get those approvals. So we have to send them everything we want to do and basically show them that none of our emissions, we're not going to harm the environment or the people is going to change. None of that's changing. Or if it is, show them why and how we're mitigating it or preventing it from happening. And then they'll give their approval in about 6 months. So typically we're waiting on them for a while, and it can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years is, I guess, typical for a project. But we have some other projects that are done in phases too that can last up to 10 years. We're doing a huge seismic project here at my site. So basically making our plant earthquake proof. And that's very difficult to do when the plant wasn't built that way originally. So that one's going to take about 10 years of doing parts of the plant one by one, but eventually it'll be done in about 10 years.
Thank you. And Jefferson High School, if you have any more questions.
Okay, there's one question.
So how does like global warming play a part in what she does? Because she's talking about the seeds and stuff, but how does global warming play a part, like on the farmers?
Farming? How does global warming play
affect the farmers?
For the farmers?
How does global warming affect farmers?
Yeah.
Yes, great question. So it affects them a lot. So for example, in Iowa, their climate's changing. So we're getting earlier frosts in Iowa, and also in the spring, it's becoming very, very rainy. So for the frost in the fall, that means that their product is still sitting out in the field before they can harvest it, because it's not quite ready to be harvested. It's not quite completely grown yet. And a frost can come and kill their product. So if they're selling it for food, that means you can have sort of like a frost burn, kind of like how you can get freezer burn on some of your food if you leave it in the freezer too long. You can get a similar effect on crops if you're trying to sell them for food. And in the spring, when the long rains that we're having now, last year there was tons of flooding in Iowa and Nebraska. It prevents farmers from planting their fields, because if their fields are underwater, they can't get their farm equipment out there to actually plant their crops. So it's pushing back when they plant, which then in turn makes their crops in the ground longer. And then they end up running into frost again, because frost is coming earlier. And it's a cyclical effect that is preventing us from growing more food, because the climate is not what it used to be, and is really affecting how much food we can produce, which is an issue when the population of the world keeps growing, and global warming is preventing us from keeping up with food production to feed those people.
Okay, Jefferson High School, do you have any more questions?
We're good.
Oh, you're good? Okay. If we have any in the chat, let's see.
We actually did have one question. We're running really low on time, but one of the questions was, Katelyn, is what do you do with the seeds that you needed to discard?
Yeah, so great question. So we actually don't waste any of them. The ones that we don't think would germinate or grow back if they were planted, we actually sell as food, or we sell as livestock food. So they go to the granary just across from the street, and we actually sell them to them. Same thing with any of like the cobs that the corn comes off of. We sell those for, they can make corn cob pipes out of them. Corn cobs are used a lot in cosmetics. So we sell absolutely everything. We don't waste anything. Even the husk and the stalks of corn, soybeans, wheat, what have you, then become silage, which is bedding for cows, pigs, horses, etc. So from that standpoint too, we're very sustainable, where we're not just throwing away things. We're making sure that we're conserving it and also giving it to other people if they need it for their products.
Amazing. Great. And that's it from the chat.
Okay. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and a big thank you to Katelyn Lichte for joining us today. You can all keep in touch with Katelyn and follow her on social media. I'd also like to thank the STEMExplore partner sites and Classroom that have tuned in live today, especially our interactive sites. Great questions, everybody. So EarthEcho also has some exciting opportunities coming up, and STEMExplore will continue tonight as we feature women in STEM careers with our virtual career connections. We have several live events scheduled in the next week. Again, visit www.earthecho.org to see our entire lineup and to register.
And you can stay connected with EarthEcho on our social media channels, as well as that website, earthecho.org.
And thank you again to our wonderful STEMExplore mentor, Katelyn Lichte, and to United Technologies for their tremendous support of our programming. On behalf of EarthEcho International, thank you for joining us, and keep exploring.
Bye-bye, everyone.